The high school halls were like a small world all on their own. Every day you could see groups sticking together like magnets, the athletes in one corner, the artsy kids in another, and then of course the popular crowd that everyone seemed to notice. It wasn't just about friends, it was about who belonged where. Social lines were clear, almost like invisible fences no one wanted to cross. Among the popular crowd was Emily. She was the kind of girl who walked with her head held high, always dressed perfectly, her phone full of followers, and her smile sharp enough to cut through anyone's confidence. People admired her, but there was something cold in the way she looked at others, especially those she thought didn't measure up. She didn't just stay with her friends, she made sure everyone knew who was in and who was out. Then there was Jake. Quiet, kind, and always sitting alone during lunch. He didn't come from a wealthy family, at least that's what everyone believed. His clothes were simple, his shoes worn, and he never talked much. Jake wasn't the kind of guy who caught anyone's attention, and because he kept to himself, most people ignored him, or thought he didn't belong in their world. One afternoon, in the crowded hallway, Jake tried to ask Emily a question about a class project. Instead of answering, Emily looked at him with a sneer, and said loud enough for nearby students to hear, "Why would I waste my time on someone like you? You're broke and you don't fit in here." Her words stung, and the laughter that followed made it clear, Jake was not welcome. High school was a place where rumors spread faster than wildfire. If someone tripped in the hallway or said something awkward, you could bet the whole school would know about it before the day was over. The gossip wasn't always harmless, it was often sharp, like a knife twisting just right. Cliques ruled the school, and each group had its own way of putting others down to feel better about themselves. Jake was the easy target. He didn't have flashy clothes or the latest gadgets, he didn't go to parties or brag about vacations. Instead he walked quietly, head down, avoiding trouble wherever he could. He didn't fight back when kids teased him, or when Emily sneered at him in class. Most days, he was invisible to the crowd, like a shadow slipping past, but Emily made sure he wasn't completely invisible. If she wasn't ignoring him, she was mocking him. Sometimes she'd whisper to her friends just loud enough for Jake to hear, calling him loser or nothing. Other times she'd make a big show of turning her back on him, or rolling her eyes when he walked by. It was like she wanted the whole school to know he didn't belong. What no one seemed to notice was that Jake never looked angry or bitter, he never begged for attention or tried to prove himself. Instead there was something calm about him, something steady that didn't fit with the way everyone expected a broke kid to act. Sometimes when Jake thought no one was watching, his eyes would light up as if he was thinking about something far beyond the walls of the school. Rumors floated around, strange little whispers that Jake's family wasn't as poor as people said, or that he had some secret no one understood, but those whispers never lasted long. Everyone was too busy judging him by what they saw on the surface: old shoes, hand-me-down clothes, and a quiet voice. The truth stayed hidden behind Jake's calm smile, waiting for the right moment to come out. One chilly afternoon, the usual rhythm of the school day was suddenly broken by an unexpected buzz. Students were whispering in the hallways, their eyes fixed on the entrance. Something was happening, something no one could have predicted. Out of nowhere, a sleek black limousine rolled slowly up the driveway, followed by a line of shiny luxury cars, sports cars, SUVs with tinted windows, even a polished vintage convertible. It was like a parade, but for one person. The entire school seemed to stop and watch as the convoy pulled up right in front of the building. Then, Jake stepped out. Not the quiet, forgotten kid they all thought he was, but someone completely different. Jake was dressed sharply, not in worn-out clothes, but in a tailored jacket and fresh shoes that gleamed under the afternoon sun. His calm smile stayed the same, but now it looked like the smile of someone who belonged somewhere, not just in the shadows, but right at the center of attention. The crowd was stunned, mouths dropped open, whispers turning into gasps. Students nudged each other, eyes wide with disbelief. Even the teachers stopped their conversations to stare. The snobby girl, Emily, was frozen in place, her usual confidence slipping away like sand through her fingers. For a moment she just stared at Jake, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The smooth cars, the expensive clothes, everything she had assumed about him shattered in an instant. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, and for the first time, she felt something she hadn't expected: jealousy. How could she have been so wrong, and why hadn't he ever said a word before? The scene was almost unreal. The boy she had dismissed as poor and insignificant now arrived in a way that made everyone else look ordinary. The halls were filled with an uneasy silence, as if the social order itself was shaking. Emily's eyes flicked away, unwilling to meet Jake's calm gaze, knowing that this moment had changed everything. After that day, the whole school couldn't stop talking about Jake. The boy who'd been invisible for so long suddenly became the center of every conversation. But the truth about Jake's life wasn't something people understood right away. Jake's family wasn't poor, not at all. In fact, they were very wealthy, but that wealth wasn't something they shouted about or showed off. It was quiet money, earned the hard way after years of struggle. Jake's parents had worked their way up from nothing, building their business step by step. They had faced tough times, losing their home, moving from place to place, but they never gave up. And when the business finally succeeded, they made a choice to live simply and teach Jake the value of humility. That's why Jake never talked about money, or acted like he was better than anyone else. He knew what it felt like to be judged by what was in his pockets. He wanted to be seen for who he was, not for what his family had. So he kept his true life hidden, living between two worlds, the quiet one at school, and the private, wealthy one at home. Emily, who had once mocked him, now found herself confused and unsure. She tried to approach him, but her words came out awkward, as if she was afraid of what he might say. "Jake, I didn't know," she stammered one day, her voice softer than usual. I never thought." She stopped herself, realizing how wrong she'd been. Jake looked at her calmly, but with a hint of sadness. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You don't have to explain." Emily's feelings were a tangled mess: regret for how she had treated him, bitterness that she had judged someone so wrongly, and curiosity about how much she really knew about the people around her. She wondered how many others she had misunderstood. For the first time, she saw Jake not as a joke or a project, but as a person with a story she didn't know. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted to be better, not because he was rich, but because she realized how much she had missed by looking only at the surface. Around them, the school was changing too. Some students whispered about Jake's family fortune, others stared at Emily's sudden change in attitude, but Jake stayed the same, calm, kind, and more confident than ever. He didn't need the spotlight or the approval. He just wanted to be accepted for who he was, without the masks or the games. And maybe now, with the truth out, things could finally start to be different. A few days after the convoy arrived, the tension between Jake and Emily reached a breaking point. They found themselves alone in the school courtyard, the noise of chatting students fading into the background. Jake's calm eyes met Emily's, who looked nervous, unsure of what to say. Finally, Jake spoke quietly but firmly. "Emily, I want to talk about how you treated me before. The way you looked down on me, called me broke, made me feel like I didn't belong here." Emily swallowed hard, guilt washing over her like a heavy wave. "I'm sorry, Jake. I was wrong. I judged you without knowing anything. I didn't give you a chance. I guess I just followed what everyone else did. It was easier to pick on someone than to face my own fears." Her voice cracked, revealing a side she never showed anyone. Jake nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "I don't want you to say sorry just because of what happened. I wish people saw me for who I really am, not for my clothes, my family's money, or what I don't have. I wanted to be seen as Jake, not the broke kid or the rich kid." Emily's face softened. For the first time she saw Jake as a person with feelings, hopes, and struggles, not just a label. "I didn't realize how much my words could hurt," she admitted. "I was so focused on fitting in, on what people expected from me, that I forgot to be kind." Around them, a few classmates had stopped to watch. The usual gossip had paused, replaced by a quiet curiosity. Some students whispered to each other, surprised to see Emily and Jake talking, really talking. The social lines, once so sharply drawn, began to blur as others started to rethink their own assumptions. Slowly, the school started to change. Students who had once teased Jake began to approach him with new respect, and Emily, who had once been the queen of judgment, started to question the way she saw others, and herself. She realized that her need to be better than someone else came from a place of insecurity, not strength. Over the weeks, Emily tried to show kindness in ways that surprised people. She invited Jake to join her group during lunch. She listened when he talked about things beyond school, his dreams, his family's struggles, the things money couldn't fix. And Jake, in return, didn't hold her past mistakes against her. He saw someone who wanted to grow. The story of Jake and Emily became something more than just a lesson about money or status. It was about seeing people for who they truly are, about admitting when you're wrong, and about having the courage to change. And in the halls of that high school, where social divides had once felt unbreakable, a new kind of respect quietly took root. In the weeks that followed, something changed between Emily and Jake. Their conversations, once full of tension and misunderstanding, began to grow into something quieter but stronger, a tentative friendship. It wasn't perfect, and they still stumbled sometimes, but the walls between them were coming down. Emily learned to look past the surface, realizing that money and appearances often told only part of a story. Jake wasn't just the boy who arrived in fancy cars, nor was he the quiet kid who used to sit alone. He was someone with dreams, kindness and strength, that didn't need to be shown with expensive things. For Jake, it was a relief to be seen for who he really was, without judgment or expectations. He didn't need to prove anything, and slowly, he found that others didn't either. The school, once so divided by labels and status, started to feel a little smaller, a little kinder. Students whispered less about who had what and more about who they really were inside. And in that high school hallway, filled with whispers and footsteps, the real lesson wasn't about wealth or popularity. It was about kindness, humility, and the simple truth that true worth comes from who you are, not what you have. Sometimes it takes a moment, or a whole convoy of luxury cars, to remind us of that. But when it happens, it changes everything.